The turning point for me was when my mum caught me with no clothes on in my bedroom and said she could see my tailbone, like she could see the bones on my backside, and she started crying. I kind of went to the lowest of lows with anorexia, and then when I came out of that, I decided I wanted to be strong and build my muscles and be proud of my body. Rugby became the thing that really appealed to me because women were getting celebrated for being strong. I'd never been to the South Island, never been to Dunedin, didn't even know what to expect at university. And there was a table and a tent for the local university rugby club. A woman behind the table said, would you like to play? And I was like, oh, I'm not sure. And she said, oh, just come along. And she got me to write my name down. And that's the start of my journey. I got asked if I would be the captain. And I was like, me? Oh, okay. And then after I said that and they left, I went and hid behind the door and thought, what the heck if I just said yes to? People always say, oh, you won 3 World Cups. I won 3 World Cups as a player. But the one I'm probably the most proud of is...
Hello, my name is Kaila Colbin, and welcome to Hunger and Heart, a podcast on the intersection of wild ambition and fierce compassion. Just before we get into today's episode, if you are tuning in from New Zealand and you are interested in joining me on a Dare to Lead program, that is the 3-day courage-building curriculum based on the research of Dr. Brené Brown. Scholarship applications for the Christchurch program close this Friday, June 26th, so get in quick. Right, today we have an absolute legend on the podcast, none other than Dame Farah Palmer. I look at Farah's accomplishments and I'm like, what have I been doing with my life? Seriously, 35 tests for the Black Ferns, captained the first 3 Black Fern World Cup winning teams in 1998, 2002, and 2006. She is in the World Rugby Hall of Fame. The National Provincial Championship is named after her. If you've heard of the Farah Palmer Cup, that's her. Beyond her sporting career, she's also continued to have an outsized impact on Aotearoa. Farah was a director of Sport New Zealand, deputy chair of New Zealand Rugby, New Zealand's 3rd representative on the World Rugby Council. She has a PhD in sports sociology, and she is currently Po'akonga, or executive director of Māori Student Success at Massey University. In this conversation, we talk about her complicated relationship with her father, her battle with anorexia, and what she truly believes has been the secret to her rugby success. So, here you are, my conversation with Dame Farah Palmer. I mean, I kind of have to start a little bit with your origin story. Born in Sequiti Hospital, grew up in Piopio. Can you tell me a little bit about your upbringing, about your family? Like, what's the Farah Palmer creation myth?
Yeah, good question. Grew up in a little tiny village called Piopio, and you know, when you grow up in a little village, you don't know any better. You don't know, it's your universe, it's your world. And for a little country town, I think we had one petrol station, like a tea rooms that was a everything shop that did the takeaways, that had Space Invader, kind of like things that the kids would play on, and did everything. And it was just a great little community to grow up in the King Country. And I just didn't know any better. But, you know, for a small town, we had a primary school and a high school. For some reason, we had a Highland dancing teacher that moved into the region. So everybody that was a young girl did Highland dancing. And we had a swimming club. We had a 25-metre swimming pool, so we had a swimming club. So, yeah, I didn't feel like I missed out on anything, actually. And in a small community, you literally
Did
get
you do
to
Highland
do
dancing?
everything. I did do Highland
Oh
dancing.
my God. Is there video evidence of this?
No, this is in the old days when nobody had any videos. So no evidence. I've probably got some actual hard photos of me in my Highland dancing outfit. And we used to have like agricultural shows where you'd go there and there'd be a rugby game, there'd be a Highland dancing stage outside, there'd be a shearing competition, there'd be dog trials. So that's the kind of thing we did, and just went round and did Highland dancing competitions. And I had all these little medals. But I'll tell you one funny story. So I bring this up when I share it with especially young children, talking about the fact that I've failed many times. And I remember being on the stage and doing the swords kind of dance, and you have to put your swords in a cross, and you're meant to delicately jump over these swords and twirl around the swords. And I think I kicked both my swords off the stage, and there was a bagpipe guy down the front who had to dodge the swords as they flew off the stage. And I remember standing there kind of, what do I do now? And he kind of just gave me a keep going. So I just danced over some imaginary swords. And to me, that was kind of a lesson of just carry on. Even if you fail, just keep going and learn from it, and pick yourself up and keep going.
Can I just tell you, I actually have a swords on stage story.
Oh,
So
yes.
my dad was an actor, and he was also a fencing master, and he was often in stage fight scenes and things like that. And he was in a stage production of Cyrano de Bergerac, which is, the famous story of Cyrano. He was this amazing, dapper lover. But one of the things that was really kind of iconic about him was that he had this huge nose. And so the guy who was playing Cyrano had this huge rubber prosthetic nose that he would wear for the performances. And they had a fight scene, my dad and this guy, and they did this over and over again. It was a long run. They did it many, many times.
Yeah.
But there was a part in the fight scene where the guy would cut to my father's right and he would parry. He would cut to his left and he would parry. And then my father would sweep his sword right out in front of him. And the guy playing Cyrano would drop down in like a squat, and the tip of my father's sword would brush the feather on his hat. It was very dramatic, and the feather would kind of swing back and forth.
Yeah.
And one night, they were maybe a little tired or not paying attention or a little too close or I don't know what, but cut to his right, he parries, cut to his left, he parries, he sweeps the sword out, tip of his sword, hits the tip of the guy's nose, knocks the nose off his face, and the rubber nose bounces across the stage. And the guy playing Cyrano and my dad stop what they're doing and watch, and the whole audience stops and watches this nose bouncing along the stage, and they wait until it stops bouncing, and the guy walks over, he picks it up, he puts it back on his face, and they continue fighting. So there you go. He taught me that same message of, the show must go on. You just keep going.
Yeah.
I love it. So tell me about your family. Do you have siblings?
Yes, I do. But I grew up with my mum and my Māori grandparents initially. So my dad denied being my dad for the first 7 years of my life. So I knew who he was, but never met him or anything because it's a small town. And so I had a great upbringing with my nana and my koro. We lived right in the heart of town. And I don't know if you know Jenny May Coffin. Jenny May's like a media kind of personality here in New Zealand. So we lived down the same street and we were neighbours. We are from the same marae, both from Maniapoto. So I always joke to people there must have been something in the water in Piopio because, she went on and played for New Zealand in netball and has had a great career, and I was her neighbour. So I loved my upbringing, a very Māori upbringing. My nana and koro could both kōrero Māori, but they didn't ever teach it to their children or to me, but I heard it being spoken around the house. And when I was 7, my dad came back into my life and mum and dad got back together again. And I remember dad coming to meet me, and he'd bought me a bike, I think it was a cruiser bike, and I knew what he was doing. He was trying to get in my good books, but I took the bike anyway. Said, thank you, I'm taking the bike. And then I don't even think I realised that my mum was not around sometimes, and she must have been trying to reconnect with dad. And then she came back to me at my grandparents' house and asked me if I wanted to go and live with her and my dad. And so my dad had a small farm, and he was a stock buyer. So I said, well, what are you doing? And she said, well, I'm going to go and live with him. Do you want to come with me? I was like, of course I do. You're my mum. So, yeah, we
How
left.
old
And
were
it
you at
was
this
we didn't
point?
7. So 7 or 8. And so then we moved in with my dad on a farm, isolated. It wasn't far away. It was only about probably 5 or 6 Ks away, but it was still not in the village. And huge culture shock. Just having to share my mum with this other strange man, and no cousins, no neighbours to play with, and probably I didn't realise at the time how devastating that must have been from my nana and my koro to suddenly not have their moko in the house. So, yeah, I think now in hindsight, it was probably a massive kind of shift for our family. And I got introduced to the Pākehā side of my family. Felt like I'd go to Christmases and they'd all be staring at me because they either didn't know I existed or, things like that. So, yeah, that was an interesting time of my life, but I adapted and adjusted. And as long as I was with my mum, I was happy.
What did your relationship? I'm making up immediately all sorts of stories about, a father who's not around for 7 years and then rocks up and here's a bike and now I'm going to take you away from your nana and your koro. So I'm immediately making up a bunch of stories that I don't want to make up. What
Yeah.
was your relationship like with your dad when you were living with him?
Well, we weren't that close. I mean, I think I was quite a adaptable child, and I was probably a bit of a people pleaser and didn't really want to make a fuss. And as I said, as long as I was near my mum, I was happy. But yeah, I didn't really have a close relationship with my dad. I think he tried. It's quite funny because my dad's completely bald, and I remember him trying to bond with me by drying my hair and telling me to make sure my blood's circulating around my head because so I just have those little memories. I have memories of us having races from the farm shed to the house and him beating me and me crying because I thought, oh, can't you let me win? I'm a little child. No, he wouldn't let me win. And I also just appreciate that they were trying, I think they were all just trying to figure it out. So yeah, I've never had a very close relationship with my father, but we get on. Yeah.
Were you, I will preface this question by saying one of the things I'm most grateful for in this life is that both my parents lived long enough for us to fully reconcile our relationships.
Yeah.
And I kind of took turns being just like disgusted by each of them. And it took me a longer than I'd like to admit to realize, like, A, they're awesome, and B, everyone's just doing their best. Did you
Yeah.
go through a phase where you were angry at him for not being around or for not being the father that you hoped he was, or was that not really a thing for you?
Yeah, I don't think I expressed my anger externally though. I probably just felt sad, I think, rather than angry. And it's not until I had children and I see the relationship that my children have with their father and how much he loves them and how much he engages with them. I was like, oh, okay, is this how a father's meant to be? Because my koro as well, my grandfather, he was very stern as well. So there was always this idea that the men in my life were not really that emotionally available. I loved my koro, but he was the grumpy one and my nana was the loving one. And he was often away doing fencing and shearing and things like that. And he'd be away for long periods of time and come back. And he was great at sharing with me. He would kōrero Māori to my nana and his kind of like generation, but he would try and speak English to me. And he would do lovely things to me that were gestures of love. Like I told him I was going to university, so he went up to his garden shed And I saw him tinkering around in there, and he came out with this pot that he'd obviously been using when he goes camping. And he gave it to me and said I could use this when I go flatting. And it had like a screw in the bottom because it had worn through in the bottom, but he'd repaired it. So I still have it to this day because I think that was his way. Or every now and then he'd give me a wad of money and go, don't tell the other mokos, but here you go, here's some money. So yeah, I got that kind of love, but no kind of real fully engaged kind of connections with male role models. And then my mum ended up having 3 more girls. So predominantly, a bunch of wahine kind of like energy around me, very close to my nana, who was loving and gave lots of lovely cuddles and things like that. Lots of aunties, lots of female cousins. So you had a real female energy to our family.
Beautiful, beautiful. So you spent some years then living on this farm, and then what happened? Tell me about your high school. When did you get into sport? You obviously were dancing previously. When did sport start to shift for you? Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, so for me, whatever was going, I was into it at our little Piopio primary and Piopio college. So we'd have athletics days, swimming days, cross-country days. And I would go and do all of those things. And I'd train on the farm and run around the farm to try and get fit. And I'd do secret training. I'm a bit of a secret trainer because we just didn't have the opportunities to go to any training camps or anything like that in the rural areas. You just worked hard and you just tried to do whatever you could, did lots of running, and played netball. So netball was the sport in our little community. And even though we were quite small in a rural school, there were smaller schools and they tended to play hockey. But I didn't grow up playing hockey, so netball was the thing for me. My mum played netball. And I just tried to do my best at all those things. So I don't think I was ever considered an exceptional athlete. So I've talked about Jenny May. Jenny May was really good at netball. And I had other friends who were super good at swimming. And I was always just, kind of simmering around the coming third or kind of doing things, but not necessarily being known as a sports person as such. But I just gave everything a go. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I'm imagining it. I'm imagining like your dad going, let's race from the barn to the thing. And you just going like, I don't care that I'm a little girl and he's a big man. I'm just going to go flat out. I'm going to give it death, and whatever happens, happens. And it sounds like you took that to all sorts of other domains as well. So how long did you play netball for?
I played netball all through high school. In primary school and then high school. I do have a memory of being the captain of the long ball team in primary school, and we had a competition and we won it. So I remember that and being the captain of that team. That was kind of like cool. And then I became the captain of the girls netball team. So I kind of started to take on those leadership roles there. And one thing that my dad did actually share recently, which I thought that's a weird memory for him, but he told somebody who remembers me asking if he had any jobs for me to do, and he said, yeah, you can go and grub the thistles. So the paddock would be full of thistles, and so I'd have a shovel and you just kind of dig them out and kill them. And he was going to only give me, I don't know, 10 cents an hour or whatever it was, but he said he would look out there and I'd still be going. He thought I would like give up after 10 minutes, but I'd be going for a while until I thought I'd earned enough money. So that must have kind of impressed him that I just kept going. So that's the kind of person I am. I just keep going, and I'm not the most talented, but yeah, I've got that determination.
I mean, it's said that determination, grit, persistence beats talent every time. But what I'm also hearing is maybe not the best athlete, maybe not the best natural athlete, but a leadership quality that was noticed kind of early on to be captain of those things from such a young age. Do you think there was something in you, like, what do you think it was in you that was getting picked up on that people were like, I think you should be captain here?
Yeah, I think the fact that I gave 100% was always something that I think you need in a leader. Also communication. So, and when I was leading, I was always trying to be encouraging. I didn't really kind of like scream at people and tell them off. I would try and figure out what is the talent or what is the strength of that person and how can I amplify that. So I would I would go, what's going to motivate this person? And this person here might be able to take a little bit of cheek, but this person here needs a lot of encouragement. This person here likes to be competitive, so race them. And so I would do that. And I think that also maybe came out because I was 9 years older than the next sister that came along, and then 15 years older than the last sister that came. So I grew up with three sisters who had very different personalities, and being that old, I kind of felt like the second mother. And because my dad didn't really help with anything around the house or the children, and I could tell my mum was getting quite stressed moving from a community to all by herself on a farm. So I kind of took on that role of I'm going to help my mum with my sisters. Whether they appreciated that or not, I don't know.
I'm sure they did. But what I've just heard you describe is something that's so essential to not only to leadership, but kind of core to the kaupapa of this podcast, which is this idea that leadership is really about how do we create environments for people to thrive? How do we lift people up? How do we let people play to their strengths? And how do we support people to express everything they're capable of expressing? And I just heard you describe that and also describe it in a way where you are really present to the fact that each person might need something different. And knowing what this person in front of me needs is essential to any kind of effective leadership. So yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, that's right. And as you grow as a leader, you also realize that's one part of leadership, but also you've got to be in a structure and a system that helps you to be able to achieve your goals. And I think as you kind of get more mature and more experienced as a leader, you kind of move from being just people focused to the structure and the systems and the processes. So yeah, that's kind of evolved over time.
Amazing. We are definitely going to come back to that. I have so many questions about that. I love it. When did you get into rugby?
Yeah, so playing netball at high school, and I have probably also explained I went through a bout of anorexia. I think I had in my head that I needed to be skinny, and that would make me like my peers who to me were skinny. And so I just ended up dieting and then got into this kind of like anorexia mode. And I didn't realize that everyone else could see it. And they were probably all having these meetings behind the scenes. And my mum told me, because I was aiming to go to Australia for a netball tournament. That was my goal. And I was so weak, I couldn't even pick the netball up and throw it very well. And so mum said, you're not going to be going because you know everyone knows that you're not well, and I pulled my eyes out. So I kind of went to the lowest of lows with anorexia, and then when I came out of that, I decided I wanted to be strong and build my muscles and be proud of my body. So I kind of came out of that. So I started getting into a lot of sport again and feeling healthy. And I think I was 16, and the Piopio Rugby Club, as you can imagine, was the centre of anything social in a small rural town. And every year they'd have a married versus singles men's game just for a laugh. And they decided it would be even funnier if they had a women's game as a curtain raiser. So this was probably in, I think it might have been 1989 or 1990, I can't remember the exact year. And I was always around there because Dad was playing and Dad was involved, and Mum was always cheering on the sidelines and playing netball as well. So I was always there on the sideline, and they shoulder tapped me and said, do you want to play? And I was 16 or 17. I said, oh, we'll give it a go. So they gave us some leftover jerseys, or I think they were still dirty jerseys or something from the men's team, and they were way too big for us. So we put that on. Some of us had boots and some didn't. We had shoes and the referee had gum boots on. They gave us about 10 minutes of coaching and just let us go. And it was really just for a laugh. So everyone was laughing at us. We didn't know what we were doing. But I remember getting the ball and running and feeling, oh, I can actually run quite fast with this ball. And then I'd get hit by somebody and it didn't hurt me too much. I felt, I'd get back up and carry on. And that was that little seed that got planted in my brain that, this is quite fun, kind of hitting people. You play netball where you're not allowed to touch anyone. You've got to stay in your zone. You can't hold the ball for too long versus rugby. You can run wherever you want. You can hold the ball as long as you want, as long as you're on your feet. You can hit people and get cheers from the sideline. So it was just a completely different way of being and being in your body. So that just put this little idea in my head. But it wasn't until I went to university that I actually experienced women playing rugby again down in Dunedin.
Okay, we'll come back to that. First of all, I have this is like the opening scene of the movie, or like early on in the movie with like the sort of, the girl who's like doing her own thing, whatever, and then gets shoulder tapped. Like I'm so picturing it up on the big screen of like, and everyone's laughing and it's sort of not being taken seriously. And then all of a sudden, like, who is this girl? What's going on here? But I also don't want to skip past, you mentioned about with anorexia and that you can't, that there were meetings happening behind the scenes. And I have to ask, how did you come out of that? And I do just want to acknowledge for anyone listening, eating disorders are a far more prevalent form of eating, just like it afflicts far more people than we might imagine. We will put a link to some resources in the show notes. So anyone listening, if you or someone you love is suffering, we'll put a link there. I certainly have had many, many struggles with body image. And, in high school, I spent some time where I would go 3 days without eating and then faint. And so I don't want to skip past that because it's quite an important thing.
Yeah, it's a big part.
How did you come through that? What happened to turn it around for you?
I think it was a series of things. I think it was the reason why I started was to be like my peers, who I perceived to be skinny. And I don't know, just a little idea in my head kind of grew to this point where I couldn't control it. And then I was kind of like feeling proud of myself for, well done, you didn't eat anything today, or you only ate an onion. Like I would stare in the fridge and look at the food and go, what's there to eat that doesn't have many calories? Oh, my mum was also a Weight Watchers kind of thing. So I think that might have been a little thing. So she was on Weight Watchers. And so I ended up being on Weight Watchers. And then I took it to the extreme. And, I know that there's a whole bunch of other stuff that was going on for me. My mum and dad separated again. So I was, when I was about 16, they separated. They were fighting lots and there was a lot of drama going on. I was trying to kind of like find who I was in that space and trying to help my mum and look after my younger sisters as much as I could, and trying to bond with this very emotionally unavailable dad, feeling isolated from my loving nana and koro, who, so lots going on. And it got to the point where the turning point for me was when my mum caught me with no clothes on in my bedroom and said she could see my tailbone, like she could see the bones on my backside, and she started crying. And she told me that everybody was talking about me, and that they all thought that there needed to be some kind of intervention. I thought I was hiding it. And so when she told me that, it kind of was the start of my very long kind of like recovery from it. But I saw how upset my mum was. I realized that everybody else could tell what I was doing and were worried for me. And so it wasn't straight, oh yeah, okay, I'll start eating again. I kind of just started to think, okay, I've got to try and recover from this. And that whole body image thing, which is another reason why I think rugby became the thing that really appealed to me, because women were getting celebrated for being strong and having muscles, and I could gain some kind of mana from that, and that suited my body shape more than being skinny. You know what I mean? So
I just imagine your mum and how hard that
oh
would have been
yeah,
for her.
yeah.
Yeah, good on her for stepping in when she did, and stepping in a way that allowed you to hear her, because it's not a simple thing, and it's the kind of thing where, in some circumstances as a parent, we might see it happening and just be completely powerless to change something. And so what a gift that she said what she said, and what a gift that you were able to hear it.
Yeah.
Okay, so university, that's when it got serious. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so being Māori and being a girl from a very small town, I think first of all I just want to acknowledge how grateful I was for our teachers and my principal for encouraging me to consider going to university. Nobody in my family, none of my mum and her generation had gone to uni. My nan and koro didn't even know anything about it. So it was a big step to even contemplate going to uni. And I remember in maybe sixth form, I don't know what that is, when you're about 15, the principal made an announcement that it was the first time that 3 of Māori students had passed School C in all of their courses. And I was like, why would he make a statement like that? And then I realized, well, actually, is that not normal? So I was lucky my peers were also all doing really well, and our year was wanting to go to university. And so I thought, okay, what am I going to do? Had no idea. And by this time, mum and dad had separated. So mum was living on the domestic purpose benefits thing. She was kind of like bringing up the 3 young kids and me, and just her whole life had changed. And I thought, how am I going to go to uni? My mum can't afford it. I've been working at the local dairy for years, but I still can't afford it. And so my mum
Digging
went
thistles
around
isn't going to get you there.
digging those thistles. Didn't really get a lot. Working at the dairy was great. That really taught me work ethic and working hard, and customer service. So I'm really appreciative of the job that I had. So my mum went round with a little plastic bag to all of the different places she thought I could, maybe there's a scholarship or something. And she went into the Maniapoto offices, that's our iwi. And she said, are there any scholarships going for anyone to go to uni? And they said, actually, there's one here to go and study physical education down at Otago University. And it's for Māori students because they want more Māori phys ed teachers. And it was a really good scholarship. So I applied for Waikato to do something like a Bachelor of Arts. And then I applied to do the phys ed degree with this scholarship. And I got it. I got the scholarship. So that was my ticket out of Piopio and a ticket to the South Island. I'd never been to the South Island, never been to Dunedin, didn't even know what to expect at university. And turned up there, complete culture shock again. Like, if you've been to Dunedin and in the South, they roll their R's. And I was like, why do they talk like that? It's so cold. I was so freaked out. And they have like those clubs and societies days in the orientation week. And I just remember wandering around going, I don't know what I'm doing here. I feel so, I shouldn't be here. And there was a table and a tent for the local university rugby club, and they had a male and a female behind the desk. And I must have hesitated because of the fact that I'd played rugby in Piopio, and just that little hesitation, that woman behind the table said, would you like to play? And I was like, oh, I'm not sure. And she said, oh, just come along. And she got me to write my name down, and turned up to the first training, and that's the start of my journey.
Do you know her name?
No idea. Not very good with
Whoever she
names.
was, like, I didn't know if she ended up being on your team or whatever, but like, what a sliding doors moment. That
Yeah.
momentary hesitation and someone just noticing it, seeing you and extending that invitation. What a fork in the road kind of moment. And before we move on, can I also just say, I love your mom going around with a plastic bag, finding the scholarship. Like, is she still with us?
Oh yes, my mum's still with us. She's looking after all of her mokos. Still lives in she lives in Te Kuiti now.
Go,
So
mom.
yeah, so her and dad got back together again when I went to uni, and then they've separated again. So now she's on her own and living her best life in Te Kuiti.
Nice one. Nice one. Aroha nui kia mama. Right. Okay. So you start playing on the university team. I'm curious about, like, so we know that you become a rugby legend. I'm curious about those, you just described this moment of hesitating and someone seeing it and inviting you in. I'm curious about those moments where there was like a turning point or like a lesson learned or a thing. Like, when did you realize you start playing at university? When did you realize that actually this could be something that is really serious for you?
Good question. Hopefully, with the stories I've already told you about what I'm like when I kind of get the bit between my teeth. And for me, I feel like I know that I'm not the most talented in terms of skill level, but I know that I've got tenacity. I know that I've got determination. I know that I'm pretty mentally and physically tough. And those are the things that I knew were my strengths. And so when I first just started playing, I honestly just played probably for the first 2 years for the pure joy and love and exhilaration of playing rugby. And it's really hard for me to explain this to people who've never played or don't really enjoy being at the bottom of a ruck with your face squished into the ground. But for me, I just had so much fun. So that was the first thing, was that it was just lots and lots of fun, and I felt completely exhausted. I love the feeling of being completely and utterly spent. You mentally, you have to think and try and think while you're exhausted, and it's a team environment, so you pick yourself up because you don't want to let your team down. When someone scores a try, everybody knows they contributed to that try. When you celebrate, you pick people up. People often say it's such a mean, tough sport, but actually there's lots of moments of caring in rugby. Like when you're at the bottom of a ruck, honestly, you aren't trying, you're looking at your mate on the ground going, I'm trying to hold everybody off you, and things like that, and picking each other up. So friends for life. People that I meet today that I used to play rugby with, and we just feel like all those years have disappeared. So I don't think I ever thought about being great then. And then I kind of started playing at prop and then moved to hooker. And a coach told me he thought I wasn't big enough to play prop, but he thought I would be a pretty good hooker. And so that's when I started throwing the ball into the lineouts and that kind of thing. And that's where I started to get noticed. I didn't really feel like there was ever a eureka moment, but I did get into the B team. So I played for the B team for Otago women, and that was, I'm in the B team. And then I got into, I was a non-traveling reserve for the A team. So I was there in case somebody got injured. And those little moments just made me go, oh, I'm starting to make some progress here, and thought, oh, what if I put a little bit more effort in, a little bit more training, and where could I get to? And that's when I started to think that this was something that I wanted to keep pursuing and learning from others and getting some more coaching and getting some tips and thinking about what I'm eating and going to the gym and getting stronger. And yeah, so I don't think there was ever a aha moment. It was just these little steps of I'm getting a bit better, I'm getting recognized, I'm getting opportunities, and how do I continue on that path because I'm really enjoying it.
Mm. I love this story. And one of the things I love about it is that I think a lot of people today, and it might be that it's a different environment today, right? But a lot of people today would think, man, if you're not playing seriously before you get to uni, by the time you get to uni, it's too late to do something serious with a sport like that. Or if you're not playing seriously right from the beginning at uni, it's too late. And what I'm hearing you say is that actually you were in an environment that allowed you to develop your skills and your commitment because you were motivated by joy and not by like, oh, I have to be performing at this level, but because you were getting that feedback of, oh, I'm getting noticed here. Oh, I get to play with the bees. Oh, I get to be traveling reserve. Oh, like those kind of positive reinforcements that
Mm.
led you to go. It became a virtuous cycle that led you to go, okay, well, now I can watch what I'm eating and I can go to the gym and I can get stronger and I can do all these things.
Yeah.
And it's a really uplifting story, because I think so many people kind of feel like, well, you have to succeed right from the beginning or you failed. And what I'm hearing you say is actually there's no grand plan or scheme of success, but it's these small wins, this small positive feedback loop that was enough to help you keep growing and compounding that over time.
Yeah, and I don't think that's necessarily the path that everybody takes. Like you would play with a player who you knew that player is magical. They are going to leap all of those things that I had to do, and they're just going to go straight into the team. And that's okay too, like some people are just super talented and athletic and do go straight to the top. But that wasn't my journey. My journey was a slow burn over a couple of years. And also I want to acknowledge that I was very fortunate that the time that I got involved in women's rugby, it was just starting to get a bit more attention. I know that there were women who played rugby in the 80s who played on the backfields and nobody kind of gave them any time of day. There wasn't a lot of opportunities to progress. And so I hit it in that, I would say, kind of like the golden time for women's rugby, where it started to get more attention, started to become an opportunity. So yeah, I was just really fortunate in terms of the timing as well. And Otago seemed to be a bit of a hotbed of talent that was coming through the rugby system at that time. I remember Annalia Rush coming onto the scene and we're like, who is this blonde whippet that is just so athletic and things like that? And Hannah Myers at the time, she came through and she came from a soccer background. Because that's the other thing. All the women who played rugby had played other sports and they brought all those skills from those other sports into rugby. We had hockey players, soccer players, netballers, touch players. They all played rugby, so they already had that kind of athletic grounding. And I was just so fortunate to be a part of that magical time in women's rugby.
Did you have any coaches who had a particular influence on you?
Oh yeah, lots. I think Sue Garden Bishop is someone I wanted to acknowledge. So she was a visionary, and she had played herself, but then moved into coaching, and her vision was the thing that really kind of, I think, pushed women's rugby to the next level, particularly for Otago. So we kind of just stayed in our area and maybe played against Southland and Canterbury and just played ad hoc kind of games. And we had no New Zealand selectors in the South Island. So she said, we need to go on a North Island tour. So she had the vision, we need to be seen. So I've got all these amazing, talented players. Let's fundraise to have a North Island tour. She got the men's NPC team involved, and we'd have these fun fundraising events. She organised a women's sports event where we would do things like run up the steepest hill in Dunedin, but against netballers and female cricketers and netballers. And this was before we had anything like Women in Sport Aotearoa or any of that kind of stuff. So she was amazing, driven, really, really committed. And we got to go on this North Island tour. And it was at the North Island tour that quite a few of us got identified by the talent agents, the selectors, and we got invited to a trial at the Wellington Police College. And that's where I got spotted and became the reserve hooker for the Black Ferns in my first trial.
You know, the premise of this podcast is the intersection of wild ambition and fierce compassion. And really, the thing I'm most curious about is how we can combine a hunger to achieve at the highest level, which for you, maybe in the first instance, when you started, it was more about grit and tenacity and determination. You get the bit between your teeth. You're not going to let it go. You're going to keep going. You'll dig the thistles until all hours. You're going to persist. But then once you become part of the All Blacks, obviously you captained the Black Ferns. Embarrassing.
No, that's right.
So you captained the Black Ferns to the first 3 World Cup championships. That is a level of ambition to achieve on a global scale. And the thing that I'm so obsessed with is how do you combine that ambition to achieve on a global scale with the care that you've described, the love that you have for your teammates, with how do you look after yourself and not be beating yourself up, that you have to be doing more, and, how can you be at peace with what you see in the mirror? And you started to touch on this when you talked about captaining those teams in high school. How did that evolve over time when you were at the Black Ferns to where you were able to bring that love and that care and that heart to what you were doing without losing sight of what was necessary in order to achieve what you wanted to achieve?
Yeah, for those first few years that I was in the team, I wasn't the captain, so I was just focused on making sure I could do the best I could in my position. And first year I was the reserve hooker, so I was absorbing, learning, taking on board all of the advice and information we were getting, figuring out where is the level that I need to be at. And in that whole time, I feel like I'm probably not a person who seeks attention, but likes to be in the background. And so I was just doing that. And then I think in 1997, I think a couple of years after being in the team, I got asked if I would be the captain. And I was like, me? I was just like, what, me? And I think it was probably a bit of a shock. And they had to convince me that it was something worth doing. So I remember they asked me. And then after a while, I said, oh, okay. And then after I said that and they left, I went and hid behind the door and thought, what the heck have I just said yes to? Am I the right person? I did not even know. And it got announced in a team meeting, and I could tell a few people were surprised. So I think that was a big moment for me. Like, oh my gosh, I'm now going to be the captain of this national team. So I think initially I tried to emulate the previous captain and what she was like, but she just had a very different personality to me, and I was trying to emulate her, and it just wasn't authentic. So I probably did a year of trying to be a captain like her, and then realized it's not really me, it doesn't suit me. and then I shifted. So I think for me, it was about just trying to do the best I could in that particular role. So now that I'd stepped into that role, I thought that I needed to be like another captain. And then I realized, nope, be authentic to yourself, but try and be your best authentic self. And that is what I was thinking, like, what are my strengths? How can I utilize my strengths to help this team? And I do feel like I'm really good at identifying talents in other people. And so starting to delegate a few responsibilities, or figuring out who's a person in the team that when they say a couple of words, everybody listens. But I think I didn't have all of the qualities of a leader, but I knew how to get that out of other people and say, well, you can lead this and you can lead that. And let's do kind of a collective leadership, but I'll be the figurehead that the media come to. Ultimately, I'll have to make some hard decisions, sometimes on the field, sometimes off, try and set the scene, all those kind of things, and see how we can keep functioning. I honestly don't think I nailed it all the time. I made some massive mistakes as well along the way.
Any in particular?
Oh, I think at one point we had a change of leadership at the coaching level, and I wanted to try and stick to the way that we used to do things with the old coach. And my manager at the time, she was really clever, and she left that book, Who Moved My Cheese, on my bed. And didn't take long to read. It's a small book, and it made me realize that I needed to change and accept that there was some change. So that was very clever. And then I kind of like adjusted the way that I led under that leader, under that coach. So I think that was probably a point where I wasn't getting it right. Other times I haven't probably led by example in terms of my own behavior, and realized that I did, probably drinking too much or something like that at an after-match function. So, had to kind of like be told, you've got to set the standard. So there's little things along the way that I've done wrong and learnt from. And then there comes a time when I don't think my leadership's right for this team sometimes. So towards the end, I realized that I needed to, because I was old school, and the new generation were coming through, that I just wasn't the right person to be leading them.
What an extraordinary level of self-awareness. I think very few people have that level of awareness awareness, and also the lack of ego to be able to say, actually, what's important here is not, can I be a leader? What's important is, what does this team need right now? And I heard you just touch on that in two ways. What you just said in terms of towards the end, you were feeling like you were old school and it needed a new kind of leadership. But even that very first one with the Who Moved My Cheese book.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking about this a lot because, of course, we run the Crusaders Leadership Program, and Scott Robertson is one of the faculty on that leadership program. And here you've got someone who coached a team to 7 consecutive championships and then went to the All Blacks and had a much harder go of it.
Yeah.
And my biggest takeaway from that was that there is never a checklist in leadership or a template that you go, yep, this is how we do it, and it's done. It's always emergent from this team, this management group, this culture, this vibe, this dynamic that's going on. And the leaders who are the most skilled are the ones who are able to release all of their attachments to, but I used to do it this way, or we used to be like this, and go, what does this moment and this person need?
Yeah, exactly. And I've been very fortunate that in my day job at the university, I kind of started in the kind of sports sociology area, and then had a bit of a stint teaching in the leadership and teamwork space, and read a book by Donna Latkin, which I really enjoyed. And she talks about leadership as a moment, and you have people who are the leaders and the followers, and you have place, and you have purpose. And a kind of leadership moment is when all those things align. So I think for me, that's what it's like. Like, you've got to have the right people in those roles. Well, not the right, but you'll have certain people in leadership and certain people in following roles. You've got to have, what place are you in? What's the context of that particular organisation or team? And then what's your purpose? Is it high performance, or is it community, or is it something else? So I think that's helped me to kind of like do a bit of a check every now and then about, is my leadership approach right for this particular place, purpose, and people?
That's so beautiful. What is sports sociology?
It is understanding that sport exists within a context that has social and cultural elements. So, for instance, you might do a personal training qualification and go in there with all of these ideas about what should work. But unless you kind of look at it from a sociological perspective, looking at the history of not only the individual but the collective, and what culture that person got brought up in, what are the social parameters that are influencing them, then that's how you'll kind of understand the bigger process. So we look at things like gender in sport, ethnicity and racism in sport, social class in sport, and how social systems and structures impact on sport.
It's incredibly powerful. Right, the work that we're doing at BOMA now is really about how can we leverage lessons from sport to promote values-based leadership. And with this kind of work that we've been doing over the past several years, what I've noticed is that sport can be such a catalyst for the best in us and for the worst in us. And one of the things that I am really thinking about a lot these days is how we can shift a cultural narrative about the role of coaches. That so often we have coaches who believe they're at grassroots level, who believe their role is to win games, and how we can shift that narrative so that the role of coaches is not to win games, but to create environments for young people to thrive, and that constitutes success.
It is hard, and I'm married to a coach now, so I totally...
He's been on the podcast. Wesley,
yeah,
Clark,
exactly.
Listen to the Wesley episode after you listen to this one. Anyway, go on. Yeah.
But he's a lifelong learner, and it's what I love about him. I get too caught up in that I'm too busy kind of like frame of thinking, but he's always looking for opportunities to learn. And, and I just admire him completely in terms of how he is, he's constantly learning. And yeah, it is challenging as a coach because your job depends on you winning sometimes. So how do you look at developing people while also trying to make sure that your win record's enough for you to get by?
Yeah, so this is actually the core question here, right? And I have an idealistic hypothesis that the combination of standards and care is where we find sustainable high performance.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's idealistic. Maybe it is when you're working at the highest level. But you've been there more than I have. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do think there needs to be a balance, and I've had several coaches, and probably the most influential coach on me, just because I think they were pushing things in a direction that NZR didn't necessarily want to go in, was Daryl Suasua. So Daryl is someone who really kind of micromanaged everything because he wanted to take women's rugby to the next level. Now that creates a lot of tension, but I think initially it worked and everybody was like on board because we were taking women's rugby to the next level. But then I think he kind of probably lost a few followers because he was so focused on that. So your idea about standards versus care, I think, is really important, because you can push people so far, but if you don't understand that it has to come from a point of caring for not just the collective, not just the team, not just the goal, but for the people, you start losing your followers. And a leader without followers is not a leader. So I think, you've got to get that balance right.
Yeah. So two things. One is I created a little model, which is a 2x2 of standards and care. And in that model, if we have low standards and low care, we get apathy. Like, why should I bother? Nobody else cares. Nobody else bothers. If we have high care but low standards, we get coddling or enablement, which is, I think, the thing that people are most often concerned about when we start talking about care and performance.
Yep.
If we have high standards and low care, which is kind of what I'm hearing you describe, then we get burnout or people leaving or, disconnection.
Yeah.
And then high standards and high care is where we get sustainable high performance. What I'm hearing you talk about with that is not just about high standards and high care, but another thing. I also created a little 3-part model of the characteristics of high performing teams. And my observation of this is high performing teams are built on a foundation of care and trust, but also that they have a common level of ambition. And so you described, right, that like, what are we here for? You described it with the purpose, you had the 3 P's, right? People, purpose, and place. And the purpose, what are we here for? If we're just here to have fun, then if I want to win a World Cup, we're going to have a mismatch that's not going to go well. And the problem isn't that you just want to have fun or that I want to win a World Cup. The problem is we're not on the same page about what we want to achieve. And so therefore we're going to hold ourselves and each other to account for different things.
Yes.
And what I'm hearing you say with Daryl is that maybe he was like very clear that this is the commitment. And some people were like, actually, that's not my commitment. That's yours. And so there's a piece there of how do we make sure we're on the same page about what we're trying to achieve together, which will in turn dictate how hard we're willing to work, how much sacrifice we're going to make, how resilient and persistent we're going to be at it, and all those kinds of things.
Yeah. And I think there were times too that where, as a coach, I think he kind of did realize that he was going off on his own and no one was following. And that we were so focused on not losing as well. I remember that one year we were so stressed about losing because we'd never lost. And that kind of negative goal of not losing just did not do well for our team culture, and everyone was stressed and anxious. So the following year we changed it to be more of a process-focused goal. We wanted to be BTB, which was back-to-back World Cup winners. Yes, everybody has to have some kind of outcome goal to keep themselves motivated, but BTB also stood for better than before. So everything we did, we tried to do better than before, and that process kind of goal that Daryl kind of instilled in our team really helped us to kind of like pick each other up again and feel motivated and feel like we could make these small gains if we were always just aiming to be better than before. And ultimately, we did win the World Cup and everyone was happy as well. So it wasn't like a very stressed out team.
I love this. And if you're listening to this, by the way, and you're interested in what Farah just talked about in terms of outcome goal, process goal, et cetera, I really recommend going back and listening to the episode that I did with Don Tricker, and then listening to the conversation that we did a separate episode where I unpacked with my colleague, Hannah Hudson, this thing of outcome or process goals, because before I talked to Don, Farah, I had formed a view that process goals or self-referential goals were superior to outcome goals. And then Don was like, what are you talking about? You have to have an outcome goal. And it kind of rocked my world. And so I've been unpacking this thing about goals for quite a while. We're almost out of time, but I do want to come back to something, and particularly with what you've just talked about in terms of building these kinds of systems. How do you tackle this? How do you build this? Before I say goodbye to you, I do have to circle back to what you said earlier about leadership, your own leadership development, moving from being people-focused to encompassing an understanding of the structures and systems that are necessary for success. So can you talk to me about that?
Yeah, so I think that's probably when I started to realize I think I've done everything I can as a captain of a team, and I felt I'd reached my limit of wanting to be in that role and wanting to stay as just a player, and And then I think I was getting frustrated because I could see the bigger picture around what could we do to improve women's rugby in the terms of the system and the structures. So when I retired from playing, I felt I started to get into governance and things like that, because that's where I felt I could make a difference, and that's where I felt we needed to focus to kind of like, stop trying to like constantly push for getting games and things like that. So I said, what can we do to get in there and change the system and structures? And that's when I moved into governance. And I'd been doing little governance stints leading up to that without even realizing it. Like, I'd be asked to go on some government committees and contribute to some documents through my kind of academic background. And so that all kind of created this other kind of space for me to enter into when I finally kind of decided to stop pursuing the black jersey and do something else that could benefit women. And those are the things I've always been passionate about, women and girls, and what we can do to try and help in terms of people achieving their goals and aspirations, and also Māori and Indigenous issues as well. So, yeah, governance was the place that I moved into to try and fix systems and structures.
What I'm hearing there is this insight that we can do so much in terms of, we've got a team here, we want to raise some money, we want to go do a North Island tour, we want to set some things up. But working at the systems level helps us move the entire playing field, like transform the entire, I mean, use the playing field metaphor, which I recognize the irony of using it, but this thing of going, actually, as we can do our stuff about setting up a tour, whatever, but as long as we're operating in the system, there's only so far as we can go. And at the governance level, gives you the opportunity to go, actually, what would it look like to change the system to really expand possibility and potential for Waihinga across the Matsuri?
Yeah, and people always say, oh, you won 3 World Cups. I won 3 World Cups as a player, but the one I'm probably the most proud of is winning the bid initially to get the World Cup in New Zealand, and then being involved in getting that whole thing off the ground and making it inclusive of tikanga and te ao Māori, getting the whole community involved, getting men and women to support the World Cup here in Aotearoa. That to me was probably the icing on the cake for me, in terms of, I consider that my kind of 4th World Cup, because I was involved behind the scenes and just absolutely loved the way that we managed to get Aotearoa, New Zealand, right behind the team, and women's sport in general that year was amazing, with 3 World Cups all within a pretty close time frame. So yeah, that was a great kind of golden moment to be involved in affecting systems and structures.
I'm going to ask a question that might sound obvious, but it's a genuine question. Why was that in particular important to you? What was it about that, winning that World Cup and tikanga and getting everyone behind it? What was important to you about that?
I think the fact that it felt like it was a genuine effort to move, I'm going to use another rugby, move the goalposts for women in sport. And that it wasn't just rugby, it was cricket, it was football, it was everything that was going on in Sport New Zealand at the time with the women and girls strategy. So it just felt like a golden moment to be involved in really having an impact on the system and making these changes that were not going to be fleeting changes, but things that would then continue to be now considered BAU, and we can continue to kind of like push the boundaries of possibilities for women and girls, and include te ao Māori in an authentic way, not just a tokenistic way. I'm really proud of the way we did that at the Rugby World Cup, and how that kind of started to kind of infiltrate into other areas. So that to me is kind of like that little seed that gets planted and then just kind of grows and flourishes without you having to put in as much effort. You still have to kind of like keep pushing, but it does become the norm, and you can see it happen. I think that's the sociologist in me. You can kind of see the mechanisms behind the scenes that are now just, oh, it's BAU now that we do this. And that's what I love, and that's my passion. So yeah, really enjoying where I am at the moment.
Amazing. Well, I am so grateful, and I know so many people are so grateful for the work you've done to advance women and girls in sport in Aotearoa, for the work you continue to do to grow not just sport, the work you continue to do to just grow people in this country. We're so lucky to have you here. And it's been like, I could talk to you for hours more. Like, I have so many more questions, but we are out of time. It's been such an honor to talk with you. Thank you so much for taking the time, for being willing to talk with me. I so appreciate it. It's been really wonderful.
No, thank you, Kaila. That's lovely. And thank you for the opportunity. I know I was pretty resistant, but I appreciate you asking me. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. I could have talked to Farah for hours. One of the things I especially loved about that conversation was the way that she talked about playing to her strengths, and also her humility, that the things that were her strengths, like that grit, that perseverance, that I'm just going to keep going once I get that bit in my mouth, that wouldn't be for everybody. She talked about other people maybe having a different kind of talent that could show up differently. So just that humility, that self-awareness, I loved it. I also really appreciated how open she was about her struggles with anorexia, and those leadership guidelines that she talked about of place, purpose, and people. Just so inspiring, so wise, so humble. What a gift. What a special woman. So generous with her stories and with her insights. Please do let me know your feedback. You can reach me on hello@KailaColbin.com. And of course, please do like, follow, subscribe, especially on our shiny new social channels. Instagram is taking off right now. If you're on Instagram, go and follow us there. I'll see you on all the socials, and I'll see you next week. Hunger and Heart is brought to you by the Crusaders Leadership Program. Whether you're coaching under fives or a professional team, we all want the same thing: to build a culture of trust, to get the best out of your people, and to grow players into leaders. The Crusaders Leadership Program lets you get up close and personal with some of the greatest rugby legends of all time. People like Sir Wayne Smith, the Professor, Sam Whitelock, Kieran Reid. You'll connect with a global group of ambitious, caring coaches from a range of codes and backgrounds. And most importantly, you'll gain skills and techniques to drive impact and outcomes for your team. The Crusaders Leadership Program is a 2-week high-intensity virtual experience. It is delivered exclusively online, accessible from anywhere. Hunger and Heart listeners get 10% off the full price of the program. Use the code HUNGER at checkout. You can find out more about the Crusaders Leadership Program at crusadersleadership.com. That's crusadersleadership.com. Hunger and Heart is created by BOMA and the entire BOMA team, including Tito Bernal, Rach Engel, Hannah Hudson, Johanna Coxon, and me, Kaila Colbin. Thanks for listening.